The night my husband's jet cut through the clouds toward Paris, with his intern sitting beside him like a prize, my card failed in a bodega on the Upper East Side. He was somewhere over the Atlantic, sipping champagne in a leather seat that cost more than my first apartment. I was standing under humming fluorescent lights trying to buy a box of pasta and a cheap bag of instant noodles. Declined, the cashier said without even looking up. His voice wasn't rude, it was worse than rude. It was bored, like the universe had decided I wasn't worth attention anymore. Try again, I said, quieter than I meant to. The words came out thin, like they were embarrassed to exist. He sighed and ran it again. The machine gave a sad little chirp. Declined, ma'am. I swallowed hard, opened my wallet and stared at the graphite black Centurion card, Elliot's emergency card, the one he'd insisted I carry as if it proved he cared. Apparently groceries didn't qualify as an emergency. My fingers slipped as I pulled out my phone. I opened the banking app, the one linked to our life, our business, our house, our everything. It took a second to load. Then the screen turned my stomach to ice. Joint account access denied, joint savings access denied, Foxbridge executive account access denied, not frozen, not pending, denied. A clean, methodical wipe like someone dragging a squeegee across glass, erasing fingerprints. He hadn't just cut me off, he had deleted me. A flicker of movement above the counter caught my eye. A tiny TV mounted over expired lottery tickets. The sound was off, but the lower third banner was bright enough to scream. Financial gossip. And there he was, Elliot Marlowe, CEO of Foxbridge Meridian Group, smiling that camera-ready smile that had raised $500 million last year. He was climbing the gleaming metal stairs of a Gulfstream G650. His hand was on the small of a much younger woman's back, not guiding, not politely gesturing, possessing. The camera zoomed in like it understood the moment. Lena Langford, 22 years old, the rising star intern, blonde hair, expensive coat, effortless arrogance. She tossed her hair like she owned the sky. Elliot looked straight into the camera as if he knew exactly where I was standing. As if he knew I was watching. The caption ran across the bottom, Marlos European Expansion, CEO and rising star LANGFORD head to Paris. My throat tightened. I slid the useless black card back into my wallet like it had insulted me. I'm sorry, I muttered to the cashier, forcing the lie out. I forgot my PIN. He didn't care, he already forgot me. I abandoned the pasta. Kept the instant noodles, paid for with a crumpled 20 I found at the bottom of my purse like a joke someone had planted there years ago. The walk back to the penthouse was 15 blocks. 15 blocks of Manhattan air that felt suddenly colder, sharper, like the city itself was turning its face away from me. The doorman Hector nodded respectfully. Good evening, Mrs. Marlowe. I wondered if he knew my key fob had been deactivated. It hadn't, of course it hadn't. Elliot didn't want me locked out, he wanted me inside. He wanted me to see the stage he'd built. The private elevator opened directly into the foyer of the penthouse. I had designed this place. Every inch of it, reclaimed oak floors, Calicut marble, soft recessed lighting meant to make floor-to-ceiling windows feel intimate even while overlooking Central Park like a throne. Tonight, that warm lighting didn't feel intimate. It felt surgical, like it was illuminating my autopsy. On the kitchen island sat an envelope, thick cream leather embossed with the logo of Elliot's personal law firm, not the firm that handled Foxbridge business. This was personal. This was clean. I set the noodles down carefully like I was placing evidence on a table. My hands were steady, too steady. There was something almost terrifying about how steady they were. I broke the wax seal. No letter, no apology. Just a document, friendly separation agreement, 50 pages. Clipped to the front was a single sheet, a printout from a real estate listing site. 1-bedroom and studio apartments in Queens, lined up like punishment. And stuck to the first page of the agreement was a yellow sticky note, handwritten in Elliot's aggressive scrawl. I trust you'll choose the mature option. Mature, his favorite word when he meant silent, his favorite word when he meant obedient. His favorite word when he was about to destroy someone and wanted them to thank him for it. As if summoned by the insult, my phone vibrated violently on the marble countertop. Once, twice, again. Emails arrived in a rapid burst like machine gun fire. From Foxbridge Meridian HR, formal notice subject, suspension of duties subject, urgent access revocation subject, pending strategic review. I opened the first. Dear Miss Bryant, pending review of your current role, your executive functions and all system access are temporarily suspended. Effective immediately. Suspended, from the company I built, the company I structured. The company whose operational backbone I designed from scratch in our first apartment back when Foxbridge was just Elliot, me, and a whiteboard. My chest tightened. Panic landed inside me like a physical weight. I dialed Elliot. Straight to voicemail. The user you are trying to reach is on a flight, of course. He was over the Atlantic. I tried his assistant, voicemail, head of legal, voicemail. The purge was absolute. My thumb moved on its own like it was possessed by self-destruction. Instagram, I didn't even have to search. Lena's story was first in the queue, glowing bright pink like it was proud to be there. I tapped. A boomerang video. A crystal champagne flute, bubbles rising and falling against the black sky outside the curved window of the G650. She tagged the location. Hotel Plaza Athénée, Paris. Caption, Paris, I'm yours. My vision narrowed. I threw the phone. It hit the sub-zero refrigerator with a sickening crack and clattered to the floor. I slid down against cold steel, clutching the cheap bag of noodles like it was the only thing that belonged to me now. I was 36 years old, born in Ohio, sitting on the heated floor of a $20 million penthouse, and I had just been fired and divorced by sticky note. The phone, face down, cracked, started ringing, sharp, violent. A number I didn't recognize, probably the bank calling about fraud, or Elliot's lawyer calling to remind me how generous the mature option was. I crawled across the marble, knees scraping expensive stone, picked up the shattered phone. Hello, I croaked, a pause, then a voice deep, gravelly, cold as winter. Faith Bryant, not a question, a statement, authority that didn't need introduction. Who is this? I managed. My name is August Langford. The name hit the air like a weight dropping. Langford, I knew that name, one of the originals, a silent investor, money behind the money, a man who never sat on the board, never attended meetings, never played the spotlight game. He didn't need to, he was the spotlight's power source. He continued, precise and flat. I am a primary investor in your husband's company. I am also Lena's father. Everything inside me stopped moving. Lena, the intern, his daughter. I don't, my mouth wouldn't form a full sentence. No, he cut in, you do not, but you will. His tone didn't rise, it didn't soften, it simply decided reality. I am aware Elliot Marlowe has frozen your assets, he said. I am aware he took my daughter to Paris on a jet funded by one of my subsidiary accounts. A pause. I could hear his breathing, calm and steady, not angry, interested. This combination of events, he said, is more interesting than angering. It displays a profound lack of judgment on his part and on my daughter's. Silence stretched. I felt like a receiver at the bottom of a well. A thing that only existed to absorb impact. So, he continued, Mrs. Marlowe, Faith, I have one question. My throat burned. What? Do you want him back? August Langford asked, or do you want him ruined at your feet? The question was blunt enough to cut through panic. It gave me air, ruined. I stared at the leather envelope, the Queen's listings, the sticky note. I thought of Lena's champagne, Elliot's smile. My voice came out colder than I expected. I'm too tired to ask anyone to come back, I said. But I still have enough energy to watch someone lose everything. For the first time, something broke his measured tone. A laugh, short and dry, not joy, a vault door closing. Good, he said, that is the correct answer. A pause, then. From this moment, consider yourself my daughter, not warm, not tender, not sentimental, an alliance. And a daughter of mine does not sleep on the street, he continued. Tomorrow we begin. The line clicked dead. I sat in the dark kitchen with a shattered phone in my hand, my reflection faintly visible in the black window. Still there, still me, still Faith Bryant. I stood, walked to the island, picked up the separation agreement like it weighed nothing. Smoothed the pages, looked at the insulting signature line waiting for surrender, and for the first time that night, a thin, cold smile touched my mouth. Okay, I whispered to the empty room, to the man 30,000 feet above the ocean. Fine, then softer like a promise sharpened into a blade. Let's see how expensive Paris can get. Because before the penthouse, before the jets, before my name was ever attached to Elliot Marlowe, there was Ohio. Not postcard Ohio, not rolling green hills and smiling farmers. The Ohio I came from was flat and gray, factory towns where the air smelled like damp cement and rust. Where the biggest excitement was Friday night football or the latest round of layoffs. My mother was a registered nurse on night shift. She moved through our rented house like a ghost, smelling of antiseptic, stale coffee, and exhaustion so deep it looked permanent. My father left when I was 10. He didn't leave like a man who announces it. He evaporated, went out for cigarettes, and never came back. He left behind a Ford Taurus he was upside down on and a stack of bills on the kitchen counter. That's where I learned finance, not in a classroom, in shut-off notices, default, late fees, collections. I learned to negotiate a 30-day extension with a power company representative, voice high and polite, pretending to be my mother. I learned contracts weren't suggestions, they were traps, and I discovered I had a mind for systems. By 16, I was a cashier at Mrs. Gable's corner market. The store was dying, I was bored, so I watched delivery schedules. Inventory ordering, how customers moved through aisles, what they grabbed first, what they ignored. I drew a new floor plan on the back of a paper bag, built a simple inventory tracker in a notebook I borrowed from school. I convinced Mrs. Gable to move high-margin items like soda and candy to the front and push milk to the back so people had to pass temptations to get essentials. Profits went up 12% in 3 months. She gave me a $50 bonus and said, "You're too smart to be stocking shelves." She was right. I wasn't driven just to escape month-to-month survival. I was driven to understand and control the systems that governed it. A full academic scholarship and 3 part-time jobs got me a finance degree and a one-way bus ticket to Chicago. I started at the bottom in the back office of a mid-level property management firm. It was chaos. Decaying buildings, tangled ownership structures, tenant records like horror stories, and books that looked like they'd been kept by a drunk. I loved it. I became the cleaner. They'd hand me a bleeding portfolio and I'd spend weeks in a windowless office rebuilding operations from scratch, untangling ledgers, renegotiating vendor contracts, automating rent collection, stabilizing assets, making them profitable. My reputation for cleaning trash is what got me on a panel at the Midwest Real Estate Investment Summit. I was 28, the only woman on stage who wasn't holding a microphone for someone else. My topic, operational processes in multifamily rental portfolios, and in the front row sat Elliot Marlowe. Even sitting still, he looked like motion. Kennedy hair, precision-cut jaw, suit that cost more than my annual salary. He was already a minor legend, founder of the fast-rising Foxbridge Meridian Group, but he wasn't scrolling. He wasn't whispering. He was watching me, taking notes. When I stepped off stage, he was the first person waiting. Handshake firm, eyes locked on mine like he'd decided something. "Elliot Marlowe," he said. "Foxbridge." He didn't compliment my dress, didn't say I spoke well. He said, "Your data on vendor cost averaging versus tenant retention was brilliant. I've been trying to solve that exact problem." He talked for 20 minutes to me, not at me. He spoke about building quality housing for the middle class, disrupting lazy old money developers who let buildings rot, vision, systems. He was passionate, smart, and I saw instantly what he was, a perfect version of my ambition with one difference. He had capital, he had access. I had binders of data. Our romance was built on those binders. It grew over late-night spreadsheets in my tiny drafty studio apartment. We'd analyze deals and he would listen, actually listen, as I tore apart flawed accounting. He made me feel like a partner, not a conquest. He'd wait outside my office in Chicago snow, not in a limo but in his beat-up Jeep, just to drive me home to my rundown building. He knew exactly when to be quiet, when to praise, when to say the one thing that lit you up from the inside. "You're smarter than all of them," he told me once. "They just don't know it yet." When I told my mother I was engaged, there was a long pause. I heard the faint click of her lighter. "Honey," she finally said, voice happy but stretched thin like fabric pulled too tight. "That's wonderful." Then the warning, clear and brutal, "I'm proud of you, but you will never be one of them. You're just visiting their world." And then, "Keep your own bank account, and never give anyone all the paperwork, not even your husband." I laughed, told her we were modern, equals, different. I dismissed it as fear from a generation that got left with nothing. We got married at a Colorado resort. Elliot called it understated luxury. I thought it was my taste. Looking back, I see every choice from the wildflowers to the menu was gently guided by Elliot and his planners. It was my taste, approved by his brand. The wedding photos were cinematic. We looked like the perfect new American power couple. But I remember his investors, old money men from New York and Boston, standing on his side of the aisle, smiling like they were inspecting a purchase. They didn't see a partner joining the firm. They saw Elliot's smart wife, a capable accessory he picked up in the Midwest. The prenup arrived by email a week before the wedding, presented as a standard formality. It was a slaughter, designed to keep me separate from Foxbridge. If we divorced, I'd get a severance package, like a fired employee. My mother's warning rang in my skull. I refused to sign. Elliot was stunned, our first real fight. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I negotiated. Sat across from him in his high-rise office with the Chicago skyline behind him and laid out my case like a contractor bid. "If my operational systems are the backbone of this company's growth," I said, "then I'm a founder, not an employee's wife. I'm not signing this." 3 days, quiet, precise, brutal arguments. I demanded equity, tiered percentages, vesting tied to performance metrics I knew I could hit. Finally, he relented. He sighed, running a hand through that perfect hair. "Fine, Faith, if it makes you feel secure." His voice was smooth again, but his eyes, just for a second, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, irritation. Like a deal he thought would be cheap suddenly became expensive. I signed. Ink heavy on the page. I thought I'd won. I thought I'd secured equal footing. I had no idea I'd just signed the most important document of my life. I hadn't just negotiated a contract. I'd armed the only weapon that would later keep me alive. 2 years after the wedding, we moved to New York. Foxbridge took 2 floors in a glass and steel tower overlooking Central Park. My name was etched on frosted glass. Faith Bryant, Director of Internal Operations, a title designed to sound secondary. Administrative, a wife job. The reality was different. Elliot was a visionary, a salesman. A charisma engine who could charm skeptics into funding dreams, but he and his partners were chaos agents. They ran on adrenaline and handshakes. They left behind broken spreadsheets, half-executed contracts, operational nightmares. I was the cleaner, but I was also the architect. While Elliot gave speeches, I built internal controls, financial dashboards that showed money flow in real time, reporting systems, compliance structures. I renegotiated master contracts with top construction suppliers and saved 8 figures in one move. Profitability didn't just increase, it stabilized. The firm went from high-risk startup to reliable asset. But in pitches, I was a prop. Elliot would stand in sunlight, all energy and magnetism, and gesture to me seated at the long table. "And this is my wife, Faith," he'd say, smiling. "She handles the internal side. Keeps the lights on, keeps the lights on." The boardroom was where erasure became an art. I'd present 40-slide analyses on risk exposure, answer questions, then an older board member would turn his whole body to Elliot. "Good data, Elliot, what's your play?" My work became good data. His guess became the play. Worse, Elliot learned to absorb my contributions like a sponge and claim them like skin. I'd outline a diligence process. What if we standardized environmental impact reports before acquisition? That's exactly what my team and I were just starting to implement. Elliot would cut in smoothly, hand on my shoulder like a loving partner. "Glad we're on the same page." He'd look at me with collaborative eyes while stealing the idea out of my mouth. I wasn't his wife. I was his uncredited think tank. Foxbridge expanded into high-end green residential projects in New York and Miami. More money, more staff, more shadows. And as the person who watched the books, I started seeing things that made my Ohio-trained stomach tighten. Consulting fees, massive ones. Paid to Delaware and Caribbean LLCs with no staff, no website, no product. Wire transfers for pre-development costs on projects that didn't exist. I brought it to Elliot one night in the sterile beauty of our penthouse. Printouts on the counter. "Elliot," I said, "who is Crestview Strategic Partners? We paid them over $2 million this quarter." He didn't look up from his iPad. He laughed softly. "Honey, you worry too much. That's how business works." "Cost of entry? It looks like a slush fund," I said, voice flat. He looked up then, charm shut off, eyes cold. "Then stop looking at it, Faith. Focus on your dashboards. You're the best operator I know. Let me handle the strategy." A compliment wrapped around a command. "Stay in your lane." Gradually the control tightened. "Run the vacation itinerary by PR," he'd say. "Brand alignment, or I'd rather you didn't wear that designer to the gala. Doesn't align with our new initiative." My choices, my wardrobe became subject to approval, not from a PR team, from him. Board meetings were polite misogyny disguised as manners. Always the only woman, they'd compliment my dress instead of my projections. "Faith, that blue dress last week spectacular," my wife was asking. I learned to smile tightly. "Thank you, Howard," then pivot. "If you'll turn to page 4, deliver data perfectly." Watch them turn to Elliot for decisions. It wasn't one moment, it was 1,000 cuts. And the realization hit like swallowing ice. I had everything. Penthouse, driver, clothes, and no power. My mother's voice returned across the years. Never give anyone all the paperwork, so I started a habit, a ritual. In the silence of my office, after my assistant left, I began building an archive. For every major contract, every partnership agreement, every wire transfer that felt wrong, I made 2 copies. One went into the official cloud filing system. The other I printed, initialed, dated, and placed in a file. That file went home with me, into a fireproof safe installed in the back of my closet behind cashmere coats. I forwarded suspicious emails to a private encrypted address, saved chat logs, screenshotted calendar invites that later disappeared. I wasn't planning a war, not yet. I was documenting truth, ensuring that if the worst day came, I wouldn't be the woman left with nothing. The beginning of the end had a name. Europa Vista Residential, Elliot's new baby, a billion-dollar European fund. He called me into his office, sat on the edge of his desk, practiced casual. Faith, he said, voice full of mock concern, I'm worried about optics. You as COO, me as CEO, launching this international fund could look like a conflict to European investors. Old school. What are you suggesting? I asked. I think it's time to elevate you, he said, smiling like a proud husband. New role, non-executive strategic advisor. He pitched it like a promotion, off day-to-day grind, time for big picture in the Hamptons house. You've earned it, but I heard the real translation, off executive committee, removed from banking authorizations. System access downgraded, moved from engine room to observation deck, allowed to watch but never steer. And then I saw myself in official photos, tasteful accessory. In legal documents, my name on a separate line, smaller, indented beneath, wife of Elliot Marlowe. I started asking the question I'd avoided. If I was pushed out tomorrow, what would I have? An art collection, dresses, a resume everyone would assume was a gift. I wasn't a partner, I wasn't even an employee, I was a well-kept amenity. The MBA intern program arrived like it always did, dark suits and ambition, children of investors hungry for proximity. This year, one separated from the pack immediately, Lena Langford, 22. Polished beauty that comes from generations of money. Smart, fast, confident to the point of arrogance. Daughter of August Langford, one of our largest silent investors. Elliot assigned her to work directly with him to mentor top talent. At first, I watched her with detached interest. She was a younger, shinier version of me, but one who'd never read a shut-off notice, never worried about grocery bills. I almost admired her audacity. That admiration died about 3 weeks later. My new advisor role still gave me passive access to Elliot's calendar and inbox. Professional necessity, I told myself. Then I saw the emails. Timestamped at 1 o'clock am, then 2 o'clock am, subjects cloaked in business language. Breakthrough idea, midnight thoughts on Miami. The content wasn't business. It was intimacy disguised as productivity. Her messages were breathless. Fawning, full of praise for his vision. His replies, Elliot, the man who used to say exclamation points were a sign of weakness, were full of emojis, winking faces, champagne glasses, a language he had never used with me. The real line was crossed at a gala for Europa Vista. Rooftop Midtown, air heavy with expensive gin and deal murmurs. I was trapped talking to a banker about yield curves when I saw them across the room. Elliot introduced Lena to a Swiss investor we desperately needed. His hand was on the small of her back, not a brief this way touch, resting, fingers splayed, thumb moving in a slow proprietary circle, possession disguised as mentorship. Cold nausea flooded me. This was the same man who recoiled from public affection, who claimed to hate workplace touching. Now he was guiding her like he was showing off an asset. And the Swiss investor, smirking indulgently, wasn't seeing a brilliant intern. He was seeing a bonus package. That night in the cathedral silence of our penthouse, I kept my voice perfectly level. Elliot. The late-night emails with Lena are crossing a line, and touching her like that tonight was inappropriate. I didn't accuse, I stated. He was pouring scotch. He stopped, turned, then laughed, soft, pitying. He walked to me, kissed my forehead, stroked my hair, soothing a hysterical child. Honey, he said, voice dripping condescension, are you seriously getting jealous of an intern? She's a kid. He held my gaze like he was diagnosing me. You know me, she's smart, she's eager, I'm mentoring her, that's all. Then the knife, please don't make this weird. My suspicion wasn't just dismissed. It was turned into a personal failing. My jealousy, my insecurity, gaslighting in my own living room. As personal erosion accelerated, professional sabotage followed. Our CFO, Gerald Hinz, loyal to Elliot the way some men are loyal to kings, requested a meeting. He sat across from me, nervous, shuffling papers. Faith, we're doing some structural optimization, he began, avoiding my eyes. The board wants to streamline primary cash accounts for European expansion. Faster wires, less red tape. He slid documents toward me. New regulatory requirement, he lied. We need to move accounts off dual signature protocol. I scanned the page. My name cosigner on every major account was being removed, cut off from the money. Why, Gerald? I asked. He gave me the lie again. Banking regulations. Outside counsel confirmed it. Formality. The paperwork was perfect, dense, plausible. Refusing would make me look petty, obstructive, but the gilded cage still gave me access to the dashboards I built. I could see where money went, and it was going to the Caribbean. Shell companies, SPVs popping up under Europa Vista. Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, standard for taxes. What wasn't standard was the amount. Millions. Tens of millions, sitting idle under labels like capital buffer and future development fees. I confronted Elliot in his office. This time he didn't laugh, he didn't soothe. His eyes went flat. I told you, he said quietly, let me handle strategy. You're not an auditor, you're my wife, stop digging. It wasn't a warning, it was a threat. Then the final piece of the trap fell into my lap by accident. An assistant forwarded a long email chain about scheduling and forgot to delete the history. Buried at the bottom was an original email from Elliot to our chief legal counsel. Subject line, faith risk mitigation. My blood turned to ice. I read it twice. He was discussing my new role, asking the lawyer to review our prenup to minimize exposure if I ever left. Then the sentence that stopped my heart. She's resisting the new structure. Find a way to make it work. It's best to keep her signing some of the liability paperwork just in case. We need her on the hook if EU regulators get aggressive. On the hook, he wasn't just cheating. He wasn't just pushing me out. He was building a firewall out of my body, setting me up as the scapegoat for the Caribbean accounts. If it went sideways, the disgruntled wife overseeing operations would take the fall. The feeling wasn't heartbreak, it was suffocation, but I come from Ohio, from a mother who worked night shifts. We are not fragile. That night I stopped being a wife, I became an archivist. I went into the office on a Saturday and told security I had a project, used remaining credentials, downloaded everything, 8 years of data onto encrypted hard drives, system logs, wire screenshots. Deleted emails pulled from servers. I met an old college friend for lunch, a partner at a securities law firm, kept it hypothetical. Whistleblower protections, I asked. She looked at me sharp. The person who reports first with clean hands gets immunity, she said. The person who waits gets called a co-conspirator. That night in the marble bathroom, I stared into my reflection. Silk blouse, dark eyes, sleep-starved. I'd spent the week like a forensic accountant, not a wife. And I asked the mirror out loud, am I just the secretary for my own future lawsuit? I wasn't planning revenge yet. The thought was too big. I was planning survival. Because when Elliot decided to push me out, I intended to have my hands locked around his ankles. The official announcement came via company memo, Foxbridge Strategic European Summit. Elliot would lead a small, agile team to meet key investors for Europa Vista. Team members listed: Elliot Marlowe, CEO David Chen, SVP Capital Markets Lena Langford, MBA Intern Justification. High-level learning opportunity. I was still technically the strategic advisor, still technically his wife. I requested a meeting, didn't wait for permission. I walked into his office while he was on the phone staring out at the park. He raised one finger telling me to wait. I didn't. I closed the door hard. He flinched, hung up. Faith, you're taking an intern to Paris, I said, not a question. He sighed, putting on the patient husband mask. Honey, we've been over this. You're non-operational now. It would look like you're second-guessing me. He smiled. Fake gratitude, manipulation. I need you here holding the fort. I felt something sharpen inside me. I'm not holding the fort, I said quietly. I built the fort. His smile vanished. Cold replaced charm. You're being hysterical and you're wrong, he said, then turned back to his screen like I was irrelevant. The day before his flight, the blade came down. HR email. Role reevaluation. 6-month unpaid advisory period pending review. Unpaid. They had legally severed my last tie to payroll. In their eyes, I wasn't an executive, not a paid advisor, just a wife. And Elliot was about to take care of that too. The night before the airport, he came home for exactly 15 minutes, not as a husband, as a man on schedule. Flight in 2 hours, he said, walking straight to the closet. Shower hissed. 5 minutes later, he walked out, towel around his waist, checking his phone. Dressed in the dark, fresh suit, perfect tailoring, smelled like the cologne I bought him, the scent I used to associate with safety. Now it smelled like exit. So that's it, I asked, unpaid. He zipped his bag without looking at me. For the best, he said flatly. Then he walked to the kitchen island and placed the cream leather envelope down like it was just another item on a checklist. This is the mature option. My throat went tight. You're divorcing me. We're separating, he corrected, eyes bored. Clean break, generous considering, offer expires in 7 days. After that we use other options. What other options, Elliot? I asked. He didn't blink. The ones where you take responsibility for the Caribbean accounts. His eyes hardened. I knew you were digging. You should have stopped when I told you. He picked up his briefcase. I'm giving you a beautiful, quiet exit. Faith, disappear. Don't be the person from Ohio right now. It doesn't suit you. Then he walked into the elevator. Didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. The steel doors slid shut. I stood in silence, heart hammering, picked up the envelope, didn't open it, walked to my laptop. I had a small electric bill due for my personal website, logged in. Entered joint card, declined, joint debit, declined, banking app, denied, denied, denied. It was all planned. The grocery store humiliation wasn't random, it was the detonation, my own savings. One small checking account from before I met him, Less than $5,000. I didn't panic, I got methodical. I went to the closet, not the dresses, the safe, hard drives, binders. I packed them into a large anonymous duffel bag. Packed 1 week of simple clothes, laptop, personal phone, and a burner phone I'd bought 2 weeks ago because my instincts had been screaming. Then I left the penthouse, didn't look back, service elevator, garage. Past black Escalades in my Range Rover. I got into the only car legally in my name, a 4-year-old Audi, drove out of Manhattan through the tunnel, onto the New Jersey Turnpike, drove until the skyline became a smudge in the mirror. Pulled off at an exit advertising food and lodging. Traveler's Lodge, flickering neon sign, parking lot full of long-haul trucks. I paid cash for one night. The room smelled like bleach, stale smoke, and despair. Carpet sticky. Bedspread burned. 2 hours ago I'd been in a $20 million penthouse. I locked the deadbolt and chain, sat on the sagging mattress, called Sarah, my old colleague from Chicago, the only person I still trusted. "My God, Faith," she whispered, "where are you? The office is insane. They announced your sabbatical." "He's gone to Paris," I said. "He cut me off, papers, everything." "Come stay with me," she said instantly. "Guest room." "We'll get a lawyer." I stared at the stained ceiling. "I can't. If he's doing this, he's watching. He'll hit you. He'll hit everyone." I promised I'd call again and hung up. I was in a war zone now. Friends were liabilities. Every move was monitored. Exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. I lay back fully clothed. Then the stupid impulse, self-destruction again. Instagram. Lena's story was new. Opera ceiling in Paris. Caption: "Work hard, play harder." And then an email notification lit my screen. Automated legal server from Elliot's personal lawyer. Subject: friendly separation proposal, time sensitive. A PDF, 7-day clock. Delivered to my exile. The humiliation was complete. The smell of the room, the tacky post, the cold legal threat. I was a fool. A smart woman from Ohio turned into a helpless wife. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the cheap desk with a clatter. I lay in the dark for 2 minutes, breathing. Then the phone lit up again. A call, unknown number. My stomach dropped. It rang again. A cold electric feeling ran up my spine. This wasn't a bank. Wasn't a lawyer. This was something else. I crossed the room on shaking legs and answered. "Hello." A deep, cold voice filled the air like it owned the room. "Faith Bryant." My throat tightened. "Yes." "Who is this?" "My name is August Langford." The same name again, only now in the motel's stale air it sounded even more unreal. "I don't know what you want," I said. "I want clarification," August said, precise, clipped. Like dictating a memo. "I received a third-party capital report from Mr. Marlowe's office this afternoon. It does not reconcile with my files." A pause. "The discrepancy suggests one of two things," he continued. "Either you as architect of internal operations are profoundly incompetent." I bristled, spine straightened. "I am not." "No," he agreed instantly. "I do not believe you are." Then colder. "I have read every operational memo you've written since 2017. The one signed F. Bryant. You are meticulous, which leaves only the second possibility." My grip tightened on the phone. "Elliot Marlowe is playing a dangerous game with my money." My brain spun, trying to find the angle. Lifeline or chain? "So what is this?" I asked, forcing Ohio sarcasm into my voice, the paternal rescue. "Saving the abandoned wife?" I expected offense. I got impatience. "Do not be tedious, Mrs. Marlowe. I do not waste time on sentiment." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I have spent the last 72 hours reading your file," he continued. "Not the magazine profiles, the real file." My breath caught. "Your prenuptial agreement, Clause 14, subsection B. And your revised shareholder agreement, Article 7.3. He was quoting the exact clauses I fought for. My heart began pounding, slow, heavy, painful. "They are sloppy," he said with genuine disgust. "In their haste to polish his public-facing brand, they left a vulnerability." He paused. "Those clauses state any new offshore entity using the Foxbridge brand and leveraging capital from existing principal investors requires." "My signature," I finished, voice barely there. "No," he corrected, "requires the explicit wet ink signature of Faith Bryant as original co-founding partner. Not advisor, not wife, co-founder. Which means," he continued, "the entire Europa Vista fund is built on sand. Legally, without your signature, those SPVs are not unstable, they are fraudulent." I sank onto the bed. The hard drives in my duffel suddenly felt 10 times heavier. Elliot had moved too fast, too arrogant. Pushed me out before securing my signature. He assumed my silence was guaranteed. He assumed I was beaten. "So," August said, voice like a blade, "I am offering you a business relationship. Not a rescue." He laid it out like a contract, full legal team, forensic accountants, secure place to live, operating line of credit effective immediately. "You will not be poor by morning," he said, then colder. And in return, you will open the files I know you have. You will give my team every email, every wire transfer, every spreadsheet you collected. You will tell us everything Elliot Marlowe has been hiding, not just from me, but from the SEC. I don't want him corrected, he said. I want him dismantled. The word echoed in the cheap motel room. Dismantled, it was what I wanted, but the terms felt wrong, a different cage. I looked at my reflection in the dark TV screen, a ghost. A woman about to trade one owner for another. No, I said, silence, dangerous silence. You will need to elaborate, August said. I appreciate the offer, I said, voice shaking but real, but I'm done being a passenger. I won't trade one powerful man's control for another. I won't be your weapon. I expected fury, instead that short dry laugh again. Good, he said, that is precisely what I needed to hear. Then. I have no use for another spoiled child who needs to be managed. One daughter acting the fool in Paris is quite enough. A beat, his voice softened a fraction but not into warmth, into clarity. I need a partner, he said. And you need a proxy, don't complicate it. Then the line that locked reality into place. Elliot just put you and your equity on my side of the ledger. Daughter, not affection. Alliance assets. I stared at the email PDF from Elliot's lawyer. I could sign it, disappear into a queen's studio, live quiet and humiliated, be mature. Or I could use my archive, burn the rotten structure down and stand in the ashes. I don't want compensation, I said, voice steady now. I don't want a payout, I want control. Silence, then approval, quiet and final. That, August said, is the correct answer. Control is always the prize. The rest is noise. What happens now? I asked. You will sleep, he said. Tomorrow morning at precisely 9, a black Mercedes will be in the motel parking lot. Driver's name Arthur. He won't speak. You will give him your phone. He will give you a new one. What about my things, the penthouse? Forget the penthouse, he said dismissively. It's a box full of his things. Leave the keys on the desk. Let him wonder. Then his final hook sharp enough to slice. My daughter thinks Paris is the destination. For us, Faith, the destination is the boardroom. The line clicked dead. I didn't move for a long time. Neon outside the window cast a sick red glow onto the wall. I walked into the disgusting bathroom and stared into the cracked mirror. Hair flat, face pale. I looked like a refugee, but my eyes didn't look like a victim. They looked like someone who had just made a decision that could burn cities. I went back into the room, grabbed the duffel bag and zipped it shut. Then I opened Elliot's friendly separation agreement, tore it in half, then in half again, dropped it into the trash like it was nothing, because I had chosen my side. And if Elliot thought Paris was where he would win, he had no idea what was coming. The Mercedes arrived at 9 o'clock a.m. exactly, not 8:59, not 9:01. 9 o'clock like a Swiss watch because August Langford's world operated on precision. Arthur was exactly what I expected, 6'4", built like a bank vault, with a face that suggested he'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. He didn't speak when I opened the motel room door, just nodded once and took my battered rolling suitcase without comment. I left the room key on the nightstand next to a crumpled $5 bill for housekeeping, the woman who'd have to clean up after my breakdown. In the Mercedes, Arthur held out his hand. I gave him my cracked iPhone and the cheap burner. He handed me a new device, slim, heavy, encrypted, the kind of phone that governments use when they don't want anyone listening. We didn't drive back to New York, we drove south, Philadelphia. The car pulled into an underground garage beneath a building that was aggressively anonymous, the kind of place where money went to hide from attention. The apartment was on the 32nd floor. When Arthur opened the door, I understood immediately what this was. Not a home, a war room, clean lines, no personality, a dining table that was really a conference table, multiple monitors. Secure phone lines, boxes already waiting, boxes I recognized because they were mine, pulled from storage units Elliot didn't know existed. Mr. Langford's team will arrive at 10, Arthur said, the first and only words he spoke to me that day. Then he left. I stood in the silence of this sterile command center and felt something shift inside me. Not fear, power, because for the first time in years I was in a room that existed solely for my agenda. At exactly 10 o'clock the door opened. Marisol Vega walked in like she was conducting a raid. She wasn't what I expected from August's lawyer, not some silver-haired patriarch from old money. Marisol was 40-something, compact, with eyes that could audit your soul, and a suit tailored so perfectly it looked like armor. Behind her came two forensic accountants who looked barely old enough to drink, but moved with the terrifying efficiency of people who understood numbers the way sharks understand blood. I don't handle divorces, Marisol said without preamble or handshake. I handle securities fraud. I'm here to ensure you don't go to prison for your husband's crimes. And if we do this right, to ensure several very wealthy men learn what the inside of a federal facility looks like. She set 2 briefcases on the table and snapped them open with practiced violence. Show me what you have. I unpacked my archive, 8 years of data, hard drives, printed documents, USB sticks, binders with tabs marking every suspicious transaction I'd flagged. Marisol's team descended on it like surgeons on a patient. For 18 straight hours we worked, no breaks except for coffee and bathroom runs. We built timelines, cross-referenced Elliot's calendar with wire transfers, mapped money flowing from legitimate funds into the black hole of Caribbean shells. At hour 19, one of the accountants, a kid named Marcus who looked like he should be playing video games, found it. There, he said, pointing at his screen, $5 million, Foxbridge Capital to Europa Vista Holdings 1 Cayman 3 months ago. I leaned in to look. I never saw that wire, I said. But you authorized it, Marcus said, zooming in. There it was, my signature, F. Bryant, electronic. My blood turned to ice water. That's not mine, I said, voice shaking. It's close. He scanned an old signature and turned it into a digital stamp. But look at the loop on the F. I never make it that way. Marisol was beside me instantly, studying the screen with predator focus. Say that again. It's forged. The F is wrong. The Bryant is too uniform, like someone traced it. I remembered Elliot's email to legal, the one I wasn't supposed to see, keep her on the hook. He didn't just plan to push me out, I said, understanding flooding in. He's been setting me up as the fall guy for months. Marisol looked at me, no pity, just calculation. This changes everything, she said. This isn't divorce, this isn't corporate theft, this is criminal conspiracy. And right now, if this fund collapses, you're the co-signer on a fraudulent wire transfer. You're not just fighting for money, she continued. You're fighting to stay out of prison. That night, August called on the encrypted phone, video conference. His face appeared on screen, stern, carved from granite, sitting in what looked like a library from another century. Report, he said. Marisol laid it out with surgical precision. The forged signatures, the shell companies, the money flowing to accounts that shouldn't exist. August didn't react to any of it, just nodded like I was confirming the weather. I assumed as much, he said. Amateurs are always sloppy when they think they're clever. Then he revealed his own hand. For the past 6 months, he said, while Elliot was busy seducing my daughter and defrauding investors I was buying, he let that sink in. Not under my own name, of course, through Delaware shells, through proxies, buying out nervous investors who smelled something wrong but couldn't prove it. He leaned into the camera. As of market close yesterday, I control 54% of Foxbridge Meridian Group. My mouth went dry. Elliot thinks he's CEO and majority shareholder, August continued. He's not. He's a high-salaried employee in a company I own. He just doesn't know it yet. The next week was silent war. Marisol's team filed dozens of motions in Delaware and New York, all carefully worded to look like routine procedures, data preservation requests, audit inquiries, document holds. Elliot's lawyers saw them but dismissed them as harassment from a vindictive wife's divorce attorney. They didn't see the securities fraud prosecutor building a cage around them. I spent 72 straight hours building what Marisol called the weapon, not just data, context. I showed how Elliot inflated Miami properties by 20% before capital raises, how consulting fees were really bribes to city officials, how the Paris trip, jets, hotels, shopping was being billed as Europa Vista development costs. Every lie he told I could prove with his own emails. Every theft I could track with his own records. On day 7, August called again. It's time, he said. The Europa Vista Fund was scheduled to execute its final transfers in 48 hours. Hundreds of millions moving to offshore accounts. But there's a clause, August said, in the original Foxbridge Partnership Agreement, the one you insisted on, Article 7.3. In the event of suspected fraud, physical presence of all founding partners required for arbitration, which means, August said, you need to be in Paris. When, tonight, I flew Economy Plus on Air France, middle seat. Between a software salesman who snored and a woman whose baby cried for 6 hours straight, it was perfect. While Elliot was dining at Le Jules Verne, the restaurant inside the Eiffel Tower, I was eating a terrible airplane meal and reviewing legal documents on encrypted tablets. While he was impressing Lena with champagne that cost more than most people's rent, I was building the case that would destroy him. I landed at Charles de Gaulle at dawn. A car was waiting, not a Mercedes this time, a Citroën, invisible. The driver took me not to a luxury hotel, but to a business center in La Défense where Marisol had set up a temporary office. She was already there, having flown in on a red-eye from New York. So was Antoine, the French lawyer Auguste kept on retainer, 60 years old, thin as a knife, with the kind of face that suggested he'd destroyed empires over breakfast. The injunction is ready, Antoine said without greeting. The moment you sign these affidavits, we freeze every Europa Vista account. Where's Elliot now? I asked. Marisol checked her phone. According to the tracker on his corporate card, having breakfast at the Plaza Athénée. Room service, €800. Of course he is. I started signing documents. Each signature was a cut. Each page was a rope tightening, one to freeze the Cayman accounts, another to alert Swiss banks, a third to notify the SEC. By the time I finished, 27 different financial institutions would be locking down Elliot's money. August lands in an hour, Marisol said. He wants to do this in person. Do what? Deliver the news. At exactly 3:00 p.m. Paris time, Elliot was supposed to be on a video call with the bank in Zurich, the call that would finalize the last transfer. The call that would complete his fraud. At 2:55 p.m., the bank's general counsel joined the call early. Mr. Marlowe, the Swiss banker said, voice flat with the particular embarrassment of Swiss banking discovering it almost facilitated a crime. We must postpone. I watched the feed from my laptop in an empty office down the hall. Elliot's face was perfect, confusion shifting to irritation. Postpone? What are you talking about? We have received an emergency judicial order from the Tribunal de Commerce. All fund assets related to Europa Vista entities are frozen, effective immediately. The blood drained from Elliot's face in real time. That's impossible. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake, monsieur. The order was filed on behalf of Madame Faith Bryant. Elliot's world stopped. You could see it. The exact moment he understood. He ended the call without another word and sat staring at the wall of his €800 per night suite. Then his doorbell rang. He assumed it was housekeeping, maybe more champagne, another bottle to celebrate a victory that was suddenly evaporating. He opened the door already speaking, just leave it on and stopped. Because standing in the hallway was Auguste Langford. Behind him, Marisol Vega, behind her, Antoine, and beside Auguste, looking directly into Elliot's eyes for the first time in 9 days, was me. I wasn't the woman he'd left crumpled on the kitchen floor. I was wearing a simple gray suit that I'd bought with Auguste's credit line. My hair was pulled back, my face was calm. I was holding nothing, no papers, no phone, no emotion. Just presence, faith, Elliot breathed, and his voice was poison trying to sound like honey. What is this? What have you done? Auguste didn't wait for permission. He walked past Elliot into the suite like he owned it. Which technically he did. It was being paid for with funds from accounts he controlled. The rest of us followed. What's going on? Came a voice from the bedroom. Then Lena appeared in a hotel bathrobe, hair in a towel, face half covered in some expensive treatment. She saw her father and froze. Daddy, she whispered, regressing instantly to childhood. What are you doing here? Auguste didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on Elliot. Mr. Marlowe, Auguste said calmly. You are in my suite. This is my suite, Elliot snapped, trying to reclaim authority. I booked it myself. With my money, Auguste corrected. From my fund, using my daughter as a prop. Which makes it my suite. He walked to the ornate desk and placed a thick binder on the marble surface. The spine read, Evidence Phase 1 as of this morning, Auguste said conversationally, my holding companies control 54% of Foxbridge Meridian Group. You are no longer CEO. You are an employee about to be terminated for cause. Elliot laughed high, desperate, disbelieving. You're insane. This is faith. This is your jealous bullshit. You're trying to ruin me because I left you. He turned to Auguste, trying to find footing. She's vindictive. She's been stealing data. She can't handle. Auguste pulled a single sheet from Marisol's briefcase. Is this your email? He asked. Sent to Gerald Hinz 3 weeks ago, he read aloud. If she makes trouble, just let her take responsibility for the paperwork. She's still my wife. They'll go easy. Elliot's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Lena started crying ugly, spoiled sobs. You did this, she screamed at her father. You're ruining everything. I love him. You're 22, Auguste said without looking at her. You love your credit cards, and Mr. Marlowe just put your name on shell companies that will trigger federal investigation. She didn't understand. She wouldn't understand until much later in a room with FBI agents what Elliot had done to her. You're not his girlfriend, Auguste said finally, voice flat as stone. You're his mule. I watched it all unfold like theater. Like watching a building I'd designed finally get demolished, controlled, precise, exactly as planned. Auguste, I said, cutting through the chaos. Everyone stopped. May I have a few minutes alone with Mr. Marlowe? Auguste studied me. Then nodded. Marisol, Antoine, Lena, get dressed. We're leaving. They filed out. Left me alone with my husband in a suite that cost more per night than most people make in a month. The air between us vibrated with his hatred and my cold victory. "You stupid," he started. "I made you," I said simply. I pulled out my phone and hit record, not bothering to hide it. "I built your company while you were playing visionary. I created the systems that made you rich, and you threw me away for a 22-year-old intern. I protected you," he screamed, stepping toward me. "The Caribbean accounts, I kept your name off the real documents. I was protecting you. You forged my signature. For your own good, you cut off my accounts. I gave you a generous exit. You tried to frame me for fraud." He stopped. The reality of the recording finally hitting him. "Faith," he said, switching tactics instantly. "Honey, we can fix this, you and me. We built this together. Push August out. Take the company. What do you want? Half more." Name it. I recorded all of it. The confession, the attempted bribery, the pathetic bargaining of a man who just realized he'd lost everything. "It's over, Elliot," I said. I walked to the door and opened it. August and Marisol were waiting in the hallway. "I'm going for a walk," Elliot snarled, pushing past us. "My lawyers will." "Your lawyers," Marisol said, checking her watch, "are about to be very busy." The elevator opened in the Plaza Athénée's marble lobby. 2 officers from the Brigade Financier were waiting, along with a man in a dark suit from the U.S. Embassy. "Monsieur Marlowe," one said politely, "we have been asked by the Department of Justice to retain your passport pending investigation." They didn't arrest him. Not yet, they just took his ability to run. The news hit financial media at 4 a.m. New York time. By market open, it was the only story, Foxbridge scandal. CEO detained in Paris fraud investigation rocks real estate giant insider CLAIMS systematic deception. I watched from August's command center in New York. He'd flown me back on his jet, not because I needed luxury, but because we had work to do during the flight. The stock price of every Foxbridge partner cratered. Investors panicked. The phone lines at headquarters went into meltdown. Then the second bomb dropped. Someone, definitely not me, definitely not from my archive, leaked a video. Elliot at a company holiday party, drunk on success and champagne, telling junior staff, "The key to any European trip is the right intern. Paris is always more fun when your luggage knows how to keep quiet." It went viral in an hour. He wasn't just possibly corrupt, he was definitely a predator. The emergency board meeting was held a week later, not at Foxbridge headquarters that was swarming with media, in a neutral conference room at Marisol's law firm. Soundproof, windowless, a mahogany tomb for reputations. "You will be there," August had instructed, not as his wife, not as the woman scorned, as Faith Bryant, co-founder and primary witness. When I walked in behind August and Marisol, the air was electric with hostility. The remaining board members, the ones August hadn't bought out, looked at me like I'd personally set their money on fire. "This is an outrage," Howard Vance, the oldest board member, started before we even sat down. "Your personal vendetta has destroyed shareholder value." "Howard," August said quietly, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Miss Bryant didn't destroy anything. She revealed what was already broken. Would you prefer to have learned about the fraud from the FBI?" I stood at the presentation screen, plugged in my laptop, and for 60 minutes I became the woman from Ohio who knew how to read a shut-off notice. I showed them everything, the forged signatures, the inflated valuations, the bribes disguised as consulting fees, the personal expenses hidden as development costs. When I showed them the email where Elliot discussed making me the fall guy, the room went silent. "My God," Howard whispered, "we let a con man run the company." "No," I corrected, "you let a charming sociopath with good hair make you money. You didn't care how until it threatened your own portfolios." August stood. "The vote is simple," he said. "Elliot Marlowe resigns immediately, forfeits all equity, cooperates with authorities, or I dissolve the company today and hand everything to the Department of Justice." The vote was unanimous. "But I wasn't done. I have a condition," I said. Every eye turned to me. "We split the company, clean assets into a new entity, rebranded with significant equity reserved for employees who stay. Dirty assets into bankruptcy to pay restitution." "You want to destroy Foxbridge," someone said. "I want to save the parts worth saving," I corrected. "The people who did real work, the ones who never stole anything. They shouldn't pay for Elliot's crimes." The board agreed, not from kindness, from pragmatism. It was that or lose everything. As we filed out, Elliot was in the lobby. He'd been released from French custody but was under federal monitoring. An ankle bracelet visible above his Italian leather shoe, he looked at me with pure hatred. "You'll regret this," he hissed. I looked through him like he was furniture. He didn't exist anymore. He was just a problem I'd solved. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new office. Not a glass tower, a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. The sign on the door reads, "Bryant Communities. We build affordable housing using sustainable practices." The staff is mostly people who stayed after Foxbridge collapsed, the ones who knew I'd fought to save their jobs. I'm reviewing plans for a new development. Location, Ohio, 2 blocks from where I grew up, where my mother still lives. It's not charity, it's good business, but it's also a reminder of where I came from and where I'll never go back to. Elliot is serving 3 to 5 years in federal prison. He took a plea deal to avoid 10 to 15. His lawyers send periodic letters asking for character references for his parole hearings. I throw them away unopened. Lena Langford got probation and community service. She also got therapy paid for by her father, who she still hasn't forgiven for ruining her love story. Last I heard, she was working as a receptionist at her mother's friend's PR firm, first real job of her life. August and I speak once a month, always business, never personal. We're not family, that was just tactical language. We're something more useful, allies who know exactly what the other is capable of. You did well, he told me during our last call. I survived, I corrected. No, he said, you evolved. The penthouse sold for $18 million. I bought a 2-bedroom in Brooklyn Heights for $2 million. The rest went into the business. I still have 1 box of instant noodles in my desk drawer, the same brand from that night in the bodega, not because I'm sentimental, but because every morning when I open that drawer, I remember. I am Faith Bryant. I am 37 years old. I am from Ohio. I built a man's empire, tore it down, and built my own from the ashes. And the only person whose name is on this door, the only person whose signature matters, is mine. Some women marry for love, some for money, some for security. I married for ambition and got an education in power, the kind of education they don't teach at Wharton. The kind you can only learn by losing everything and discovering you're the only person who can give it back to yourself. Elliot thought he was teaching me about business, but what he really taught me was simpler. Never give anyone all the paperwork, never sign anything you haven't read, never trust someone who says trust me, and never ever let them convince you that being mature means being silent. My mother was right all along. She usually was. Last week she came to visit the Brooklyn office, looked around at the exposed brick, the modern furniture, the wall of windows overlooking the bridge. Not bad for a girl from Ohio, she said. Not bad at all, I agreed. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Was it worth it, everything you went through? I thought about the penthouse, the private jets, the husband who turned out to be a stranger, the company built on lies. The night in the bodega when my card was declined. Ask me in 10 years, I said, but we both knew the answer, because I wasn't asking anyone for permission anymore, not to exist, not to succeed, not to take what was mine. The phone rings. It's my assistant, one of the junior accountants from Foxbridge who followed me to the new company. Miss Bryant, the Ohio Development Committee is here for the presentation. Send them in, I say. I stand. Straighten my jacket, not designer, just well-made. Check my reflection in the window, not for beauty, but for strength. And prepare to build something that no one can take away, because I am Faith Bryant, I am the architect. And this time I'm building for myself. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it touched you, drop a 1 in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story. I read every single one. Subscribe for more stories about women who stopped being safety nets and started being their own anchors. See you in the next one.